So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Talib Hassan Johnson. He's now an assistant professor of Africana and African American Indian Studies at Cal State University, Fresno. Dr. Johnson received his bachelor's degrees in Africana Studies and Philosophy from California State University, Dominguez Hills in 1996, and his master's degree in African American Studies from Temple University in 1997. In 2001, he took the position as the Assistant Dean of Students in the Office of Black Student Affairs at the Claremont Colleges. Simultaneously, he taught classes in both Africana Studies and Social and Behavioral Sciences departments at California State University, Dominguez Hills, and the Intercollegiate Department of Black Studies, now known as the Intercollegiate Department of Africana Studies, and Pitzer College's International and Intercultural Studies Department at the Claremont Colleges. He received his PhD in Cultural Studies from Claremont Graduate University in summer of 2007. Dr. Johnson is a 2006 Ford Dissertation Diversity Fellow. He currently teaches at California State University, Fresno in Africana Studies and African American Indian Studies program. His research focuses on resistance cultures and media with Africana communities. It also emphasizes how Black masculinity, identity formation, political ideology, icon construction, and the imagination have been used as tools for social agency, cultural development, and political mobilization. Please welcome Dr. Talib Hassan Johnson.
How's everybody doing? Hotep. Assalamu alaikum. Baragani. Yeah. What's happening, y'all? Gotta speak the language of the people. You know? I first want to thank the Office of Black Student Affairs, Dean Hugh Suffering, Kim Gadlin, Dante King for inviting me out. I really want to give them a round of applause. It's a funny thing getting to watch this. I don't have to do anything. It's a funny rule. Anyway, also, I wanted to very quickly acknowledge how beautiful this looks. Y'all seeing this? That's the kind of lineup I want to see. I'm tired of seeing people go to jail. I want to see this. That's the people I want to see on the news. All right. Well, I very quickly wanted to say a few things. I hope y'all don't mind. But I wanted to start with the importance of this ceremony and why we're here. I want to focus on three reasons, very briefly. The first of which is to the parents. For those of you who are paying tuition, who have been sending money for a wide variety of reasons, who have paid rent and room and board on the campus, who have been sending checks, and sometimes you don't even know what the hell for, that's about to end. So y'all might want to take a moment and just kind of pause yourself. One is to the students. Now, for those of you that have been to commencement today or who will be going tomorrow, you'll find that in most commencements there will be no time to recognize the family that have been instrumental in their lives, right? And by family, we're not just talking about blood, because you know how we do it. Family is who's there for you and who you're there for, right? So there's usually not any time to acknowledge that, but here, in Black Grad ceremony, you get a chance to do that, right? Students get to come up front and say a little something to the people that have been incredibly instrumental in their lives. So that's another reason why this is an incredibly important ceremony, because for us, in our culture in general, acknowledgement of those who have sacrificed for us is key to what happens. So that's another important aspect of the Black Grad ceremony. The other one, last one I want to quickly mention, is that at the official commencement, you get the official degree, right? You're said to have finally been trained, you're being formally acknowledged. But at the Black Grad ceremony, we remind you before you leave two things at the very least. One, that you're loved, right? And we love these people up here? Well, y'all playing around. Do you love one, that you love, and two, that you come out of a tradition, and we're going to remind you of that tradition before you leave. Because unlike others, it's not just enough to get a degree and go get a job, especially if you come out of our community. Because it took a lot for us to get here, whether you know it or not, right? So this is the opportunity where we get to remind you, you have a charge. As a student coming out to the African diaspora in the United States, you have a legacy, a history that pertains to you being here. So we're going to remind you about that before you leave. It's our tradition to kind of put our hands on you and to remind you that you're loved not only by us, but of course by the Most High, and especially that there's a tradition there that you need to acknowledge. So we're going to do that in just a moment. And in order to do it, we got to look back. We got to take a look at the past very briefly. The first group I tend to like to acknowledge in these kind of settings is those that immediately sacrifice for us. And I'm talking about family. I'm talking about friends, right? And when I sat on this stage a few years ago, I had to remember all of the people that had sacrificed for me to be here. And there were two that came to mind. And it wasn't that they were the only two, but they were two that came to mind at the time. The first of which was my grandfather, who spent 35 years as a carpenter. The man hated wood, but spent 35 years as a carpenter so my mother could eat, could go to school, and could raise grandchildren, right, who could be successful. I just came yesterday from my sister's graduation. She finished her PhD at USC yesterday. And the second person was, of course, my mother. Single mother who raised two bad kids. Well, maybe one. But for her, to see her yesterday, right, looking at both of her kids, knowing that all the sacrifices she made, and I'm telling you, my mother could stretch $1. We never knew a day without food. She did. There were some times she gave her plate up to her kids to make sure we ate. So to see her yesterday be able to be honored by her children, well, it just touched my heart. And I want to remind the students that you want to do that. You want to focus on the people that have made it a point for you. The second group are the activists. Now, we know that for there to be a black presence on a college campus, especially a predominantly white college campus, that did not happen because people suddenly changed their minds. That happened because there was a history of activism and people pushing the boundaries to make sure there's a black presence. The existence of black faculty, staff, administration, and students is a product of that struggle to make sure that we My father was one of those people, right out of Riverside Community College. They held a sit-in and a protest. He was a member of the Black Panther Party, and it was his job to sit in front of the president's office door and make sure that the president could not go in his office until he acknowledged the student demands. Right? When the president finally sat down and acknowledged all the student demands, he said, I only have one of my own. He said, that man that sat at the door will never graduate from here. It took my father 22 years to get back into school. So the activists, and we're not even talking about those that have been in prison, those who have disappeared for a variety of reasons, all of those activists made it a point for us to be able to stand here today and honor our children, our family members on the stage. So we need to also acknowledge that history. Lastly, the general history, the narrative that we come out of. We are a people that have been taken from our homes. And in doing so, I've been seeing recently there have been these new kind of historical narratives on the news and on TV now, right? Start with slavery and kind of magically end up with Obama. It's kind of a real interesting narrative, like that's just the whole purpose we were here. It goes from slavery and like Martin Luther King, and that real quick paragraph, I have a dream, and then goes to Obama. But really, we need to look at that history and acknowledge again what I'm reading, right? When many of us were taken, we often assumed that we were all one homogeneous people. We have never been, nor are we still, a homogeneous group. The people that were taken spoke different languages, had different cultures, had even warred with one another at different points in time. So I want you to ponder on the importance of this group of people on a slave ship actually learning and forcing themselves to engage one another because we decided on being a people. There was no continental African sensibility at the time. You had people that lived in different regions. So it was a tremendous act for people to say, okay, we're going to look up. And much of the time we revolted on plantations. We created our own communities, and those communities weren't easy to create because you had people from different places with different experiences. Native American groups that were a part of that, and we still were able to build maroon communities and all kinds of things. And then we would go from plantation to plantation, raiding. Don't get me started. You know what I'm saying. But that history is there, and we need to acknowledge that that plays a role in why we're here. We are a community by choice, by culture, by circumstance. And we still live those choices every day. So I want us to acknowledge that. And sometimes in our response to some of the negative issues that have come upon us, we build institutions to challenge those. Slavery, negative institution. What was our balance and challenge to that? Family. Now let's look at that. You're talking about a people who can be sold at any moment. Just because you got married had no bearing on whether or not you would be there for your wife and kids next week if master decided to sell you. Or mother. So what do? We built extended families. We still got them to this day. I got aunts and cousins that I have no idea how they're related to me. But that's the tradition we come out of, right? Y'all playing with me. Y'all know that? Okay. That's the tradition we come out of. Being able to build family despite that we're not supposed to have it. That is an act of agency. That is not an accident. That is willful. Right? And our families were broken apart. People were sold to the winds. We made it a point to build family with those who cared and extended love, and we extended it right back. That's how we build our family. And I'm hoping that these students on the stage, or excuse me, these graduates on the stage will remember that this community that you have sitting on stage with you will provide you a network of opportunities as long as you choose to use it. Y'all are a cohort. Use that. The people in this room have already given that authorization to you, so please take advantage of it. I quickly wanted to say that although we have this long-standing tradition, we've had some issues with internalizing things that aren't necessarily best for us. Right? We've had some negative things that have come in. Sometimes we've internalized some concepts like white supremacy. One example of that is colorism. How many of y'all have heard of colorism before? I bet you have. See, I grew up in the El DeBarge era. I know what colorism is. You couldn't get a date if you didn't have hazel eyes and curly hair. I don't know what y'all talking about. I remember that. I still owe Denzel and Wesley a little pound. And I see them for helping each other out. Right? Class discrimination, we still do that. Even when we ain't got no money, we do that. I knew people that just would carry themselves like they were better than you because they bought the new Jordans. People that had Mercedes Benzes, but they were still sleeping on their mama's couch. We all living in the same apartment building that you driving a Mercedes. Right? Those are the things we internalized to try and show that we were better than others. So one of the things that I charge that we can do to combat some of those things is to look at these graduates on the stage and say, look, you all represent a tradition, and you are also bringing a training to bear that will help us work out these issues, that will help us make sense of the very complex situation we're in today. You have had the privilege, and I mean privilege, and I'm not saying that privilege was easily obtained by any means, but you have yet had the privilege to spend at least 4, some of you a little longer than 4. I ain't going to point nobody out. We're going to say y'all are extra students, y'all are super students, okay? You've had the opportunity to be here and study. Now that is something that we really need to pause on. You have had the opportunity to spend 4 or more years studying when most people had to leave wherever, whether it was high school, whether it was junior high. My grandparents didn't make it through elementary school, but had to live life, had to provide for family. You have had the opportunity to study, to look at the connections between things that many of us may not see connections with, to anticipate problems that may impact our communities and need to be dealt with. You are in a prime position to be able to anticipate those problems and, most importantly, articulate the response necessary for dealing with them. That is a powerful position to be in. So to have people who can do that, who have had that training, we need to make sure that they are in a position to come together and to articulate those needs on a regular basis. We need leaders who can articulate those problems and connect how they function, make sense of what we're told, because I hope we ain't just listening to CNN and Fox News to get our perceptions on the world. Sometimes we need to sit down with the people who just finished school and say, okay, what did you know? What did you learn about that? You know, I'm going to tell you what I read. You tell me what you've learned. And when they sat at the feet of some of the people sitting over here on the stage, trust me when I tell you they have something to tell you. Okay? So in that, we try and make sure that they remember that, because we live in a very strange time. My grandfather never thought he'd see a day with a president of African descent in office. You know what I mean? You see the brother walk on the Air Force One, like, you know, I've never seen a president walk like that. My grandmother would say, man, that's the first lady with hips. You know, she got hips. Challenge you, so we live in a strange time, because in that we have a president of African descent, a first lady who's a Chicago girl up and down. Despite that, we live in a time where, strangely enough, racism doesn't exist. Oh, I'm the only one that's heard that? Y'all didn't hear that? You didn't get the memo? Racism is over? No, I'm just telling you, that's what they said. I had a student the week Obama was in office. She got up, left my class, and on her way out, she said, there is no more racism, and therefore I don't see the need to study Africana studies anymore. And all we do is talk about racism or something. But I said, okay, well, your first lesson in this post-racist era is that you will get an F in my class. You know, but I'm going to give it to you with love, but you still fail, you know. But we have to remind people, and that again is something that these people are uniquely primed to do. We have to remind folk that although we're supposedly living in a post-racist moment, there's still some things that are happening that are problematic, right? The imprisonment rates. They seem to coincide with the number of prisons built. Now, we're told that they're building prisons because of this need to imprison all these criminals, but once you've had a chance to read and study and not have to necessarily feed a family while you're doing so, and just really take the time to ponder, you tend to find out that historically speaking, especially since the end of slavery and the need by white elites to reclaim it freed black labor, you find that prisons were built first. And then the crimes were created to kind of suit the population of people that just so happen to be free labor prior to those laws, right? So we find that there's a correlation between the rising number of prisons built and the rising number of black folk being in prison. And I just want you to remember that those connections are not accidental. But racism doesn't exist. So keep that in mind, right? The recession that we're living in now, the unemployment levels that are hitting people all over, seems to hit our community twice as much as anybody else. Oh yeah, racism doesn't exist, I'm sorry. You may be discriminated against because of your name, because of the sound of your voice, the accent, and we ain't talking about accents from outside the country. You know, we have a lot of different ways of speaking. You get on the phone and try and rent an apartment, you might find that it ain't just available to you. For some reason, there's a problem when you call. That apartment ain't available, but, you know, racism doesn't exist. You may have to pay higher interest rates for homes and for cars. You come in that office and sign a piece of paper. But that's just coincidental, because racism doesn't exist. Less than 1% of black businesses produce revenue. Or actually, I'm sorry, black businesses produce less than 1% of the national revenue in this country. But that's mainly because we're just not good business people, right? There's no other reasons for that. Well, we have twice the infant mortality rate that other communities have, but racism doesn't exist. We have higher homeless rates. We have double the percentages of prostate and breast cancer among black men and black women than other communities, but racism doesn't exist. 65% of women and children with HIV are black. Where do all of these things come from? In an era where we have a black president, right? That is probably one of the biggest reasons that I am in such excitement about being here, because I get to see the people who are primed best to address publicly these issues and make sense of them. Because sometimes we need people who have had a chance to think and write and put things down on this. So even if your major is physical therapy or your anthro, it doesn't really matter. As a black graduate in our community, we're going to look to you to say something, because you come out of a long tradition. And that tradition of speaking truth to power is something that we want to continue. So we support you, not only out of love for you as an individual, but love for what you can do. And ultimately, the reason for that is we want to make sure that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you all are sitting up there watching your kids graduate and push the agenda to a whole nother level. I'm going to end, but I think it's only appropriate to end on love. Because I want to make sure that as these students get ready to come to the stage to be acknowledged, that they remember that they are loved. Right? So if you will all quickly join with me in just briefly saying, Class of 2010, we love you. Please. Class of 2010. Please just remember the charge, graduates. You come from a long tradition of excellence, of protracted struggle, of principled activism, and those, like many in this room, who have sacrificed for the next generation. That's the community you come out of. Please continue that struggle so that next year we can see you pushing the agenda further. Thank you very much.